So I'm starting with this image that sort of sums up my fascination with this question of how animals make these perfect habitats for themselves, yet we have such a hard time doing that. And we're so far away from that sort of beauty. And you wouldn't believe what's around this passion flower. I was waiting for my family on the sea in Italy, which seems like that's like an idyllic kind of image that comes to mind, but it's actually full of concrete and these in post-industrial buildings in this parking lot. So it was a horrible parking lot. And I heard this buzzing and all this activity. And there were these passion vines full of these bees. And I never realized that 5 bees can fit inside of a passion flower. But when we look at ourselves, we also fit. We also have a perfect fit. This is our beginning. This is our first home. The body of another person. That's Leonardo da Vinci. So I want to talk about the body and ecology and space and all the things that we tried to explore this week. So as architects, the sort of resounding image of the body is one, the Vitruvian man that's on the right, that was rediscovered by Leonardo da Vinci. And it's always a man, of course. But here, notice it's in a circle. The circle, the man inside of the circle, was part of our imagery, at least until the time of Le Corbusier, when he also was trying to rediscover classical proportions in a modern way based on harmonies of music, harmonies of proportion. That didn't quite, that was also ridden with problems, one of which was that they sort of arbitrarily decided in their office one day that they were going to base their ideal man on a 6-foot male. That was a kind of arbitrary decision, because the ideal, like, we know there's no normal human body. There's no ideal man or woman for that matter. But then we have architectural graphic standards, which, so at least in architecture school, the extent of what we learn about the body has to do with the exterior envelope and its dimensions, which change according to each person, whose proportions between each other are not fixed. They're constantly changing, even through the lifespan. So we have these standards which are completely obsolete, and we lost the circle. We lost the circle that surrounds the human. The cosmos has long been shattered. But if you look back into history, that's just one conception of the body. We have Chinese medicine with all the meridians going through the body. So the body's an energy field, embedded and nested in other energy fields. And I think it's non-trivial that in the Indian tradition and the Chinese tradition, the Indians have Vastu, the Chinese have Feng Shui, that there was like, you can't just build a building because you feel like it, or you want to try out what triangles look like, or you pick a random shape. It's all codified according to the cosmic proportions and cosmic relationships. Even in the Middle Ages, the body was connected to the stars. All the astrological symbols were connected to different organs of the body. So, and then you have, so we're in these conceptions of the body, they're not separated from the cosmos. And so the human form is a microcosm of the macrocosm, which was originally where the Vitruvian man came from. And it's not just the exterior envelope, they're inner dimensions of the human body that you can contact to know more about the world around you and yourself, because they're not separated. So to a yogi, the body is a laboratory for life, a field of experimentation and perceptual research. And with modern neuroscience, we now know scientifically, we can measure the envelope of the body that's expanding out into space. Our parapersonal space is out at the end of our fingertips. You guys, all the electromagnetic field of your heartbeats are all overlapping right now. You can measure the human heartbeat from 15 meters away with fine instruments. So I'm always looking for imagery of the human body that is an energy field that's enveloped in these larger energy fields, and artists are the best people to express that. Anthony Gormley, and this is Hundertwasser, and those layers around the two people together. So this is Emerson Hall. This image is it's over the philosophy building at Harvard. There's this high-minded statement from the Psalms, from the Bible, and that's where Alfred North Whitehead taught. He wasn't trained as a philosopher, but as a mathematician, but he was invited to Harvard to give these really important lectures. And to his students, he said, you'd be better off forgetting those high-minded words over the entry and meditate on your viscera. Now, what did he mean by that? He was trying to create, he created what's called the philosophy of the organism, and he wanted to create a cosmology where the human organism was a part of this larger fabric of life. And so let's read what he has to say. Here's very difficult to read, but he's really enjoying this huge renaissance because what he said is so relevant today. The body is that portion of nature which at each moment of human experience intimately cooperates. There's an inflow and outflow of factors of actuality and the human experience, so that each shares in the existence of the other. The human body provides our closest experience of the actuality of nature. So other philosophers since have said that one of the deep problems with ecology is that we have forgotten the fact that we are part of nature. So how do we actually feel that? How do we actually experience that? And then he goes on to say, it is the accepted doctrine in physical science that a living body is to be interpreted according to what is known of the other sections of the physical universe. This is a sound axiom, but it's double-edged, for it carries with it the converse deduction that other sections of the universe are to be interpreted in accordance with what we know of the human body. And then we have Merleau-Pony saying something similar. He also read Whitehead, and his last work is very much influenced by Whitehead's ideas. The world is made of the stuff of the body. So there's this dualism in Western thinking that there's two kinds of stuff. There's mental stuff, and then there's physical stuff. But both Whitehead, Merleau, and Merleau-Pony, John Dewey, the ancients, Chinese medicine, Indian Vastu, that's not the understanding at all. This duality between the physical and mental, they're differences. They're not differences of substance, but they're differences of dimension. And then we have, in Guadalajara, Galen and I did a workshop on, I talked about the relationship of John Dewey and Matthias Alexander, who everybody probably knows that Galen's an Alexander teacher. But Dewey did so much work on trying to reconnect the dualism between the mind and the body. And he gave this really interesting lecture, it's online, called Preoccupation with the Disconnected. And he said the evils with which we suffer in education, in religion, in the materialism of business and the aloofness of so-called intellectuals from life, in the whole separation of knowledge and practice, all testify to the necessity of seeing mind, body as an integral whole. And he said that he conceptually was considering this, how to overcome the mind-body dualism. But it wasn't until he started doing Alexander technique that it really came home to him how this interconnection, mind and body are. And from that work, he started the Chicago laboratory schools. his experiential education that you learn by doing, came after his encounter and work with Matthias Alexander. Now, the major books, the really breakthrough books in cognitive science, Mind and Life, Lakoff and Johnson's Philosophy in the Flesh, Ian McGilchrist, The Master and His Emissary, all have this quote in common. If you open up those books, you will, about 5 pages in, you're going to come across this quote. To see the organism in nature, the nervous system in the organism, the brain in the nervous system, and the cortex in the brain is the answer to the problems which haunt philosophy. And when thus seen to be in, not as marbles in a box, but as events are in history, in a moving, growing, never finished process. So a moving, growing, never finished process. So throughout time, there have been, I'm doing like a brief history of how body-mind education has been some historic precedents. And one important one was Jacques Delacroix's eurythmics that he taught at Hellerau in Dresden, which was visited by all the European avant-garde. Le Corbusier's brother was a piano teacher. He was close friends with Delacroix. So Le Corbusier spent time there. Vasily Kandinsky, Klee, all these really important people. So when you look at Le Corbusier's work, his breakthrough promenade, his movement through the building, these are new ideas that were in no small part influenced by his experiential encounters, perhaps at Hellerau. Then we have the Bauhaus. So Hellerau was shut down in 1913, but then in 1919, we have the Bauhaus, which had a preliminary course, which was first taught by Johannes Eitzen and then later Moholy Nagy. And part of the preliminary course was they had these sensory awareness workshops. So I just want to read this quote. And there was a wonderful exhibit on this at the Bauhaus in Berlin some years ago. At present, our education is an overwhelmingly intellectual, ignoring almost everything to do with our sensory experiences. Bringing education into a state of equilibrium, that is, giving the student enough food for the brain, yet at the same time not neglecting the sensory experience of nose, tongue, ear, eye, fingers, is one way of overcoming the present faults of the education system. Only the total use of the abilities, the integration of the senses, and the intellectual power will allow an organic development of the individual. A person balanced in both intellect and emotion will be better able to face the complexities of modern life. So they did they did a lot of blindfolded explorations like we did in our workshop, and this was honing the sense of touch, so they did these hand sculptures that were designed for the human hand to touch. But it's also interesting to see how very beautiful they are. So how visually beautiful they are. And in these exercises, integrating the senses creates beauty on these multidimensional levels they're not flat. Touch doesn't like flatness. And then we have Lawrence and Anna Halpern. Lawrence Halpern was a landscape architect, and Anna Halpern was a dancer. And together they did these experiments in the environment, where on the top picture, that's in 1966, they had urban planners and graphic designers and scientists and architects and even engineers they went through San Francisco on these sensory awareness outings, and then they did it also at Sea Ranch in Northern California. And then we have our very own Galen Kranz, who we have a legendary person in our midst. From 1989 to 2018, she was teaching her body conscious design course, which I don't know of another course that has lasted that long in history. And then we have Richard Schusterman's Soma aesthetics that he's developed. And this is why when I first got the book, I'm saying amen, significant tendencies. Anyway, I'm like flying off the page there. But so Richard Schusterman was, he's a pragmatist. He's a huge Dewey fan. And he was very interested in Dewey's encounter with Matthias Alexander. And he wanted to dig deeper into that and the aesthetics, and seeing aesthetics not as some extra layer that's rarefied, but as something that's organic and rooted in nature and rooted in the body. So he does really interesting work. And there's actually a conference at Moholy-Nagy University in Budapest where he's going to be there. I'm going to be there. Vittorio Galeazzi is going to be there, and Stephen Hull's going to be there. And we're going to talk about soma aesthetics. And this is a class that I do at the University of Venice in the Neuroscience Applied to Architecture Design program, where we encounter materials the first way with blindfolds. And then this is my inspiration down in the right-hand corner. That's the Bauhaus doing the same exercise or similar exercise. That's from that course. Now, the other day, Ute said that research gets boiled down to simplified recipes, neglecting holistic design approaches. And I really related to that because I've been working in this area for many years and seen many student projects trying to apply neuroscience to architecture. And what often happens is it's not beautiful. It lacks dimension. And this idea that we have to apply these scientific principles to design is, I support that, but it's something that informs our work on one level, but unless it's integrated, like the way Dewey was talking about integration, like the way Moholy-Nagy was talking about integration, it's not going to make a beautiful building or a beautiful project. And I really think that the way that we can integrate these principles is through our bodies and through our experiences. And that's what we tried to do. So in the long line of somatic practices, we now have moving boundaries. So this was our workshop, and this was one of my favorite exercises because Karina got us we had to be primed and prepared to get to this sort of spontaneous, playful place. But what I noticed at a certain point in the process, it became aesthetic in the sense of aesthetic being like a higher order of, like a higher order, that order emerges spontaneously. These are more of our exercise. So and it became beautiful, like beautiful in the way that nature's beautiful, movement. This is another one of our exercises in the blindfolded walking, and how it seems so obvious that when you close your eyes, you experience the world differently. But what happens is all of your other senses awaken, and you realize how sensitive you actually are. They created it but even in this was just they created this. What did you guys call this? I can't remember. But resting space. But even this simple way that they're situated here, it's dimensionalized. It's three-dimensional. It's happening on all sides. It's not two-dimensional. And people are interacting. Their feet are interweaving. There's a lot of connection here and a lot of volume. And that's another thing we noticed when we did, after Galen guided us through this what she called subcortical exercise. Things became more voluminous and more. I'm getting flashbacks to those Halprin workshops that they were doing in San Francisco and Sea Ranch right here. So, as Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, who developed body-mind centering, says, Embodiment is a being process, not a thinking process. And this does not discount thinking or intellectual thought and engagement in any way. It just puts a ground beneath it. And I think, as you'll hear with Andrea's talk, that the cortical layers of our brain are deeply rooted with all the others, with with what we share with other animals. So they're not separated, they're integrated. But our culture tends to favor certain positions over others. Even in the image I just showed you, when you lay on your back, you see a completely different world. It depends where you look. So I want to go back. Well, there's a philosopher of atmospheres, Gernot Böhme, and he was mainly interested in ecology before he got into atmospheres, and his emphasis on atmospheres came from his wanting to find a way to show how things are interconnected, to show how atmospheres are a way that we can, all of the wisdom that we have in the body, the immediate reaction we have when we walk into a beautiful space, it's a bodily experience. It's a bodily experience first, and then the thinking comes later. So we could call it a being experience first and a thinking one later. But he said the problem of ecology is very much a problem of the relationships people have with themselves. The distanced, instrumental attitude taken towards external nature is also taken on as a part of nature, which they themselves are. When one wishes to speak of natural oblivion, it is primarily a matter of humans who've forgotten their affiliation with nature. In the resulting task of integrating nature as an essential, intrinsic part of the way humans see themselves, art could really contribute something. It is a matter of regaining sensuous forms of existence, of the rediscovery of the body, and the rehabilitation of physical presence. So this was his response to somebody asking him, what role can art play in helping with the ecological crisis? And he said this is the root of the problem. So what artists can do, and I would include us in that group, is to help others and ourselves regain sensuous forms of existence, rediscovery of the body, and rehabilitation of physical presence. And I think that's what's been happening this week. And so through these workshops, I realized that what a building can do is give us a sense of physical presence. Other art forms don't have that same power. They can ground us in the material reality. They can shape the way we move. But first, they have to meet us as another body with the sense of gentleness. They can greet us when we enter them and give us a place to put our hand. Is it warm? Is it shaped in a way that conforms with the way our hand is? Does it make us want to touch it? And all these handles here, and you'll see them more when we get to Helsinki, wood keeps the heat of your body because it's porous like your body. But if these handles are metal, they take the heat right out of your body. Which is why this handrail, wrapping it with leather, gives you an experience of skin on skin. You're literally touching another skin. And this is a ceiling at the concert hall we went to, which even sitting down, I wanted to touch that ceiling. So I went up there not so I could see the view down, but so I could get my hands on the ceiling. Because look at all those ripples, how organic they are. It attracts you towards it because it makes you want to touch it. Meeting the body considers where you put your feet and what you're looking at while you walk. So this is Leverance's church, St. Mark's, and this is the outside. So there's nothing flat. And I say this over and over again. I'm going to say it again. But there's a study done on it compares Americans who walk on concrete sidewalks and Europeans who walk on cobblestone streets. And if you walk on a cobblestone street and on an uneven surface, you have to pay attention to how you walk. It's really hard to go fast on cobblestones. But the people who walk on cobblestone streets tend to keep their balance as they age, whereas the Americans who go on smooth sidewalks lose their sense of balance. Because this is an instance of the environment is you're interacting with the environment in a way that it's reinforcing your abilities and not disabling you. So the simple thing of walking on a cobblestone street or a smooth concrete can exercise your sense of balance, or it can just help you get from point A to point B so you don't notice what's around you. But also in the church, this floor is so tender. The fact that somebody put so much care into each one of those pieces, which may have been broken off pieces of some other tile, it makes you feel cared for as a body. And this water fountain becomes this wonderful ritual of drinking. And Suchi pointed out how they were thoughtful enough to give people of different sizes and shapes a step to stand on. And depending on the material you use, you can show human touch, the accretion of human touch. And then the bricks. Bricks are dimensioned the way they are because they fit in the human hand. So all the bricks are about this width because the brick makers, it makes them easier to lift them. And they're never very big because otherwise it would take, they'd have to use two hands. So all these dimensions that fit the proportions of the human body, and I think you perceive that. So texture, I want to touch these walls. I want to get closer to them. So an embodied architecture, an architecture of being, will give you sacred places to contemplate life and death, but also to expand your mind. So this is a temple of learning. Just by the way the design treats it with this incredible dignity. And in the children's room at the library, there's a radiator behind that screen, and there's a bench in front of it. So that's going to be a really warm, lovely place to sit. Just as this is a warm, lovely place to pray, kneel, and sit. And I think maybe it's time for shag carpeting to make a comeback. Because it really works. And these are the lights at the church. So much detail, so much care. And imagine when it's raining and being at this chapel, how the drips are being caught, how the elements are being celebrated. And then architecture can remind us that light is an event. And that shadows, that we inhabit an Earth, like Earth is rotating 1,000 miles an hour right now. But we feel this amazing stability. But when you invite shadows, they track time in a way that's very comforting because it keeps you connected with the cycles of life on a moving planet. And a sense of dignity. And a sense of our cosmic connection. So maybe instead of putting a man in a circle, we can find other ways to celebrate our connection with the cosmos, with nature, and with each other. The fact that our perception is not this, perception is inherently relational. And when I was at the Sky Space, I keep remembering Merleau-Ponty's words when he said that color is where the brain and the universe meet. And Lakoff and Johnson used color as an example in their philosophy of the flesh to show the interconnectedness and the interwovenness of our perception and light and the reflectivity of the objects around us, that color is also an event. It's this unique moment in time that's shifting. So peeping through the hole of the chapel, this is Suchi's image, it reminded me of walking into a house with a perfectly set table where everything's prepared for your pleasure and your needs, and the thoughtfulness and simplicity of that. So going back to Dewey and his essay that he did for the Academy of Medicine in New York, he said, the more human and civilized humankind becomes, the less there is some behavior which is purely physical and some other which is purely mental. So true is a statement that we can use the amount of distance that separates them in our society as a test of the degree of human development in that community. So think about the implications of this. What if we all took this on as a challenge to integrate mind and body together? To have, and I think about this in food and cuisine, that's really been accomplished. That food, we need it for nourishment, but it becomes an aesthetic event. And it almost becomes more satisfying. But also it's really sad to eat alone because there's so many it has so many social and so much social significance. Because food is not just food. It's not something you just can drink out of a straw and you'll be satisfied. It's this deep sense of nourishment. And if we could do the same in our architecture, I think we'd be going in the right direction to finding a home for our bodies that welcomes us. Thank you.